Bonjour everybody and welcome to Paris. I'm here in the city center of one of my favorite cities in the world, and today we're talking pros and cons of living in this iconic European city. So if that sounds good, come along. The first pro that I want to discuss is the fact that the city of Paris is one large museum. The city is made up of the most fantastic architecture that you can find pretty much anywhere in the entire world. You get these amazing buildings, you get these little streets, you get old castles, you get beautiful courtyards, and the city itself has also just amazing museums, whether it's the Louvre, whether it's the Orangerie, which has one of the largest paintings of Monet, Musée d'Orsay, and they have many different kinds of museums. The cool part of the museums also is that if you're under 25 or you're a student, you get to go to these completely free, which is an amazing part of living in Paris. It's like such an artistic way to live, and that's why I think it's so iconic in movies and all of these different things. So number one, museum city. Pro number two is that Paris is incredibly diverse and vibrant, meaning that you can have a city with many different vibes depending on where you live inside the city. If you go to the northeast of the city, you'll find that there are lots of immigrants from the Arab world and the African world, making it a very vibrant and interesting place to visit. I'm here in La Marais, which is the Jewish quarter as well as the gay and LGBTQ quarter of the city. If you go to the more central part, you'll have the very historic vibe. If you go to the suburbs, you'll have more of a traditional vibe of what you would find the average Parisian, that's not mega rich, is living. And each pocket of the city has very different feelings. So it's a city that you can really never get bored in because of this, which makes it so interesting to explore and to live here. The third pro that I can think of is that the city really has so much going on. You'll never get bored living in Paris. They have endless amounts of things to do here, whether it's museums, as I said before, or expositions, or trade shows, or clubs and nightlife. The city has so much to offer, and since it's one of the biggest cities in Europe, you'll always find cool concerts, cool events coming to the city, especially with regards to music. You'll always find different things to do with art, with theater, and all the things that come with that. Paris also has amazing sports teams, so if you love soccer, PSG is one of the best teams that you can find in Europe. You can come watch them here. You can watch rugby, you can watch basketball. There's really an endless amount of things to do in Paris. It is a little bit expensive to do them, but nonetheless, you will never find a weekend where there's not something cool going on, which is what we like. Our next pro is that life in Paris as a student is incredibly good value. With the student card that you get from a Parisian university, or a university in Europe, or a university from around the world, you can do a bunch of stuff in Paris for free, which means that if you move here when you're young, you're able to attain a certain lifestyle that you probably wouldn't be able to because Paris is quite expensive. So flash your student card and get discounts at places to eat, museums, cafes, bars, all this other stuff. They also have special student nights, and they have big Erasmus student union type things. Erasmus is the international exchange for students here in Europe. So there's always cool things to do for young people, and they know how to keep it cheap because life in Paris is very expensive. My last pro for Paris and what makes it really great to live here is the public transportation system. They have the most metro stops of any city in a small amount of space. So it's really easy to get around the city with the metro, with the bus system, with the intercity trains. They go directly to the airports, which is also super nice because sometimes it's super expensive to get yourself from the airport to the main city. It's also a hub, so traveling from Paris is really easy. You can find flights all over Europe and all around the world for really fair prices, which makes it a really good central location if you like to travel. And if you're planning on traveling in Europe, we're really close to Brussels, really close to Amsterdam, quite close to the south of France, quite close to Germany, so the location of France itself is really great for being able to explore Europe, and why not do it from one of the world's best cities? Although Paris is an amazing place, and there's of course many great things about it, there are of course some cons. The first being the weather. As you can see, I'm here in November, very gray, kind of windy, kind of depressing day. It's a bit cold. Paris, along with this part of Europe in general, is incredibly gray. It's a bit rainy. It doesn't get terribly cold here, but the gray thing kind of gets old after a while. If you move here and spend the winter in Paris, you'll notice that you'll have this blanket of sort of gray sky behind you. It's super not ideal, and this kind of drizzle rain situation that makes this part of Europe, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, not super ideal. The summers in Paris are super nice. Sometimes it can be hot, and one thing is that many apartments don't have air conditioners. So as it's been getting hotter in the summer in general in Europe, you can have a really brutal month or two because you're not gonna have an air conditioner. So the weather, not super easy, not ideal. It's not Thailand, but you know, it's certainly not Moscow either. The second con that I will tell you about is that Paris is incredibly touristy and it's incredibly crowded. So everywhere you go, you're kind of fighting for position amongst all the people. The city center, the first arrondissement, as they call it, or the first district of Paris, is the most touristy place you can probably go in the entire world. Paris gets the most tourists per capita every year, and Paris is the #1 most visited city on the planet. So you're jostling for position with all of these tourists, which has a negative effect also that it makes everything in the city center very expensive. So if you want to go to Versailles, if you want to go see the Notre Dame, if you want to go see other things in the city, realize that the prices are high, that you're going to have to wait in line, and that the authentic experience that you're looking for is a little bit harder to find because there's so many people catering to these millions and millions of international tourists that come to this beautiful city every year. As a person who tries to avoid tourists, if you explore Paris, you can of course go to places where there's no tourists. If you go to the northern part of the city or the southern part of the city, away from the Eiffel Tower, away from the Notre Dame, you'll find the real Parisians. But if you don't try, you'll end up in lines behind Chinese tourists, which is never an ideal situation. The third thing I'd like to cover in the con section is the price. Paris is incredibly expensive, and the value for your money here is bad in comparison to many other cities that I've been to, many other cities around the world even. I think there's maybe a few cities that are worse value for your money, probably San Francisco, New York, Singapore, Tokyo, but Paris is high on the list. It's super expensive to rent an apartment here. It's super expensive for a hotel. It's super expensive to eat out. A beer can be 9 euros, 12 euros if you're in the city center. Dinner is gonna cost you 25 euros, 30 euros. We're talking $40 just, you know, for simple stuff. I mean, a sandwich could run you, you know, $10 in this city. So for me, as a place that's more of a sustainable place to live, where you can have a lot to do, that is a good value for the price, Paris is probably the worst city to live in. This is really highlighted in the housing market, as the price per square meter in Paris is one of the highest in the world. So for example, I lived here for about a year, and I lived in an apartment that was 21 square meters, which is about 150 square feet, so really super small, and I was paying 1,400 euros a month, which is about $1,700, $1,800 per month. So the value for your money here is really tough. There are ways to save money, and if you live here, you'll definitely figure out how to do it, but having the expectation that you'll live in a large place or that you'll be able to afford a lot of things, unless you make a lot of money, really challenging. My number 4 con for Paris is that the city is so big that it sort of makes it hard to meet people. So meeting people in Paris or in any big city around the world is a challenge. You become one of a million, and here in Paris, 1 of 5 million. It's a very anonymous place with a lot of people that don't know each other. Parisian culture is not the most friendly, not the most opening to foreigners. If you don't speak French at a high level, that can also be a problem for meeting people, as French people typically don't like speaking English. So if you don't speak French, it can be challenging to kind of expand your circle. There are things you can do, and I'll put them in the description if you're interested in finding easy ways to meet people if you do move here to Paris. But from what I've heard from a lot of people, even though it's one of the biggest student cities in the world and one of a city with a lot of young people coming to live in, it's really not super easy to find friends, to make friends, to go out, to have a really good time with a lot of people in your circle. Half culturally, half because of the size of the city. So it's something that you'll have to figure out for yourself when you get to this amazing place. Our next con is about the public transportation again. So while it's a really good public transportation, it's very well connected. It is kind of dirty. Some of the trains are quite old, so not the nicest. During the summer, the metro often smells like piss very aggressively because people like to pee in the metro. As it's also during the winter because as it's cold, a lot of homeless people do live in the metro or spend a lot of time in the metro, and there's of course no public toilets. They actually addressed this in Paris, and they made urinals outside, but people complained because they saw people peeing from the windows, so that's not ideal. And then the secondary part is the metro can sometimes be quite confusing because you pay to go in, and the one ticket doesn't isn't the same for everything. So your one ticket that you get for the metro doesn't actually work on the tram. It doesn't work on the intercity train. So sometimes you're forced to go into an intercity train station, you put your ticket through, and then you expect to go to the metro, and your ticket is invalid because you've already scanned it. So I find that really annoying. It's one of those things. If you are staying in Paris for a longer period of time, you'll probably get a Navigo card, which is the swipe card, so this won't happen to you. But if you're using the metro on a daily basis, using the carnet of tickets, these little ticket stubs, the paper tickets, can be a bit annoying. A little bit dirty, but you know, it's a major city. What are you gonna get? The last point that I will make about Paris, in a negative way, is that the bureaucracy here is very French, meaning it doesn't work very well. So it takes a really, really long time to process paperwork. It takes a long time to do things online. The websites don't work very well. So I know getting my visa for France was very confusing because the online instructions were all over the place. There's a lot of bureaucratic agencies here, and the bureaucracies in Europe, especially in France, function very slow. There's not a lot of corresponding offices, so sometimes you have to wait for one office to process it before you get it, and then it goes to another office and you have to wait for that as well. I noticed here in France they also have a very old school methodology with paperwork. So for example, for my my mobile phone, I had to actually physically, instead of canceling online like everyone normally does, or canceling your service through the app, I had to physically send a notarized postage mail, like real mail, snail mail, to their central office to cancel my my mobile phone plan. As well as when I needed to cancel my gym membership, I had to do the same thing. So there's this really old school paperwork methodology here in France that makes absolutely no sense in a modern capital of Western Europe, but that's just kind of the reality of it. So be ready for some really ridiculous bureaucracy, and you'll get through it. So that's it for me. I hope that was incredibly helpful. If you have any questions, of course you can comment below. I lived here for almost 1 year, and I definitely enjoyed my time. I figured out how to mitigate the cons and enjoy the pros. So if you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we will see you in our next French video. Au revoir, mes amis.